The millionaire doubted the young street vendor until he solved the puzzle without hesitation. Get ready to witness one of the most incredible stories of hidden genius, unexpected brilliance, and social status. It comes from natural talent, curiosity, and the kind of raw intelligence that can't be taught in any classroom. If you're ready to be inspired by this amazing story of recognizing genius in the most unexpected places, make sure to hit that like button right now. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of what's about to unfold. Now, let's dive into this extraordinary story that will remind you why we should never judge someone's intelligence by their circumstances. Chapter 1. The Encounter. The scorching afternoon sun beat down on the bustling streets of downtown Los Angeles as Dr. Marcus Chen stepped out of his black Tesla Model S and surveyed the crowded sidewalk outside the Wilshire Grand Center. At 58, Marcus was one of the most successful venture capitalists on the West Coast, with a portfolio worth over $3 billion and a reputation for identifying innovative technologies before they became mainstream. Today, Marcus was heading to a crucial meeting with the board of directors for Chen Ventures, where he would present his latest investment strategy, focusing on artificial intelligence and quantum computing startups. The presentation contained mathematical models and technological projections that represented months of analysis by some of the brightest minds in Silicon Valley. But, as Marcus hurried toward the building's entrance, his attention was caught by an unusual sight that made him pause despite his tight schedule. On the corner of Wilshire Boulevard and Figueroa Street, a young Latino man who couldn't have been more than 19 years old had set up a small folding table with an array of items that seemed completely random. Mechanical puzzles, Rubik's cubes, chess sets, and what appeared to be handmade mathematical games and brain teasers. The young man, whose name, Red Diego, was currently engaged in solving a complex-looking puzzle, while simultaneously calling out to passers-by in both English and Spanish, trying to attract customers to his modest street vendor setup. Puzzles, brain games, mathematical challenges, Diego called out with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved what he was selling. Test your intelligence, challenge your mind. Marcus found himself intrigued despite his hurry. As someone who had built his fortune by recognizing intellectual potential, he was curious about the young street vendor who seemed to be treating mathematical puzzles as entertainment rather than drudgery. Approaching Diego's table, Marcus could see that the puzzles were more sophisticated than typical street vendor merchandise. There were three-dimensional geometric puzzles that required understanding of spatial relationships, mathematical logic games that involved complex number patterns, and even what appeared to be homemade chess variants, with modified rules that would require advanced strategic thinking. Interesting collection, Marcus commented, picking up a dodecagonal puzzle that seemed to involve rotating multiple interconnected pieces to achieve some kind of specific configuration. "Thank you, sir," Diego replied with obvious pride. "I make most of these myself. This one you're holding is based on group theory principles. It has 43, 252, 1003, 274, 489, 856,000 possible configurations, but only one solution." Marcus almost dropped the puzzle. The number Diego had just quoted was not only astronomically large, but also precisely accurate for the type of mathematical permutation puzzle he was describing. Most people couldn't even pronounce a number that large, let alone calculate it for a custom-designed puzzle. "Did you just calculate that number, or did you memorize it?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious about how a 19-year-old street vendor could possess such sophisticated mathematical knowledge. "I calculated that last week when I finished designing the puzzle," Diego replied matter-of-factly, while continuing to work on the complex puzzle in his hands. "It's based on the mathematical formula for permutations of a 12-sided regular dodecahedron with constrained rotational symmetries." Marcus stared at Diego with growing amazement. The mathematical concepts the young man was discussing casually were advanced enough to challenge graduate students in mathematics or computer science. Yet here he was, selling puzzles on a street corner, instead of attending MIT or Stanford. "Where did you learn about group theory and permutation mathematics?" Marcus asked, setting down the puzzle and giving Diego his full attention. "Mostly from books I get from the public library and online courses. Diego replied, finally completing the puzzle in his hands and setting it aside. I've been interested in mathematics and logical problem-solving since I was a kid. My family can't afford college, so I teach myself and practice with puzzles like these. Diego gestured toward his collection with obvious passion. Each one of these represents a different type of mathematical or logical challenge. I designed them to help people understand that mathematics isn't just abstract theory. It's beautiful, elegant, and fun when you approach it the right way. Marcus found himself fascinated by Diego's combination of advanced mathematical knowledge and entrepreneurial spirit. But what impressed him most was the young man's obvious genuine love for intellectual challenges, regardless of any potential financial reward. "Diego, can I ask you something?" Marcus said, pulling out his phone to check the time. "I'm actually on my way to a business meeting where I'll be presenting some complex mathematical models related to artificial intelligence investments. Would you be interested in looking at a problem that my team has been working on?" Diego's eyes lit up with excitement. "Absolutely. I love solving new types of problems." Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out a document containing one of the mathematical optimization problems that his investment team had been analyzing for weeks. The problem involved calculating optimal resource allocation for AI training algorithms across distributed computing networks, the kind of challenge that typically required specialized software and advanced degrees in computer science or applied mathematics. "This is a resource optimization problem that we're using to evaluate potential investments in artificial intelligence companies," Marcus explained, handing Diego the document. "My team has been working on it for 3 weeks using sophisticated modeling software." Diego studied the problem for less than 2 minutes, his eyes scanning the mathematical notation and constraint parameters with obvious understanding. Then, to Marcus's amazement, he began writing calculations on the back of a piece of cardboard using a simple ballpoint pen. "The key insight," Diego said as he worked, "is that you're treating this as a linear optimization problem when it's actually a nonlinear dynamic system. If you apply Lagrange multipliers to the constraint functions and use gradient descent with momentum, the optimal allocation becomes much clearer." Marcus watched in stunned silence as Diego continued his calculations, using mathematical techniques that Marcus's highly paid team of analysts had never considered. Within 10 minutes, Diego had produced a solution that not only addressed the original problem, but also identified inefficiencies in the approach that Marcus's team had been using. "Here," Diego said, handing the cardboard back to Marcus, "your optimal resource allocation should follow this distribution pattern, which will reduce computational costs by approximately 37%, while improving training efficiency by about 23%. Marcus stared at the calculations, quickly recognizing that Diego's analysis was not only correct, but also more elegant and efficient than anything his team had produced after weeks of work. "Diego," Marcus said slowly, "do you realize that you just solved in 10 minutes a problem that my team of PhD mathematicians and computer scientists has been working on for 3 weeks? Diego shrugged modestly. "It's an interesting problem, but once you recognize the underlying mathematical structure, the solution becomes pretty straightforward." Marcus looked at his watch and realized that his board meeting was starting in 15 minutes, but he also realized that he had just encountered something far more valuable than any business meeting, a genuine mathematical genius working as a street vendor because circumstances had never given him the opportunity to demonstrate his capabilities in an appropriate environment. "Diego, I need to ask you something very important," Marcus said urgently. "Would you be willing to come with me to my board meeting? I think my colleagues need to see what you just accomplished." Diego looked uncertain. "Sir, I appreciate the interest, but I'm just a street vendor. I don't think I belong in a business meeting with important people." "Diego," Marcus replied firmly, "you just demonstrated mathematical ability that exceeds most professors at top universities. You absolutely belong in that meeting, and I think you might be exactly what my company needs." What happened next would transform both Diego's life and Marcus's understanding of where true genius could be found, and how easily it could be overlooked by people who made assumptions about intelligence based on circumstances rather than capability. Chapter 2. The Presentation. Despite his initial hesitation, Diego agreed to accompany Marcus to the Chen Ventures board meeting. though he insisted on bringing his puzzle collection with him since leaving it unattended on the street would mean losing his entire day's potential income. Marcus quickly arranged for building security to store Diego's street vendor setup safely while they attended the meeting. As they rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, Marcus explained the context of the meeting and the significance of the mathematical problem Diego had just solved. "Diego, the board meeting I'm about to attend includes some of the most successful investors in Silicon Valley," Marcus said. "We're discussing a $100 million investment strategy for artificial intelligence companies, and the mathematical models you just improved are central to our decision-making process." Diego listened carefully while adjusting the simple button-down shirt and jeans that made him look distinctly out of place in the elevator, heading to one of Los Angeles's most exclusive business environments. "Mr. Chen, I want to make sure I understand the situation," Diego said thoughtfully. "You're saying that the optimization problem you showed me is being used to make investment decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars?" "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "And your solution could potentially save our portfolio companies tens of millions in computational costs while improving their AI development efficiency." When the elevator doors opened, they walked into the sophisticated conference room where the Chen Ventures board of directors was already assembled. The room contained 8 of the most influential venture capitalists in California, each managing investment portfolios worth billions of dollars. The board members looked up with obvious curiosity as Marcus entered with a young Latino man who clearly wasn't part of their usual business environment. "Marcus, we were expecting you 10 minutes ago," said Elizabeth Warren, not the senator, but a prominent investor who shared the name. The board's chairwoman. "I hope everything is all right." "Elizabeth, everything is more than all right," Marcus replied as he moved to the head of the conference table. "I want to introduce Diego Ramirez, who just solved one of our most challenging mathematical optimization problems in less than 10 minutes. The board members exchanged skeptical glances. They could see that Diego was young, casually dressed, and obviously not from their typical professional circles. "Marcus," said Robert Kim, a senior partner who managed over $2 billion in technology investments, "I'm not sure this is the appropriate venue for whatever this is." "Robert, this is exactly the appropriate venue," Marcus replied, confidently. "Diego, would you mind explaining to the board how you approached the resource allocation problem I showed you?" Diego looked around the conference room at 8 of the most powerful investors in America, clearly intimidated by the situation, but determined to rise to the challenge. "Ladies and gentlemen," Diego began, his voice gaining confidence as he focused on the mathematics rather than the intimidating audience. "The problem Mr. Chen showed me was treating AI resource allocation as a static linear optimization, when it should be approached as a dynamic nonlinear system." He moved to the whiteboard at the front of the conference room and began writing mathematical equations that immediately captured the attention of everyone present. "The key insight is that computational resource allocation for AI training doesn't follow linear patterns because of the way neural networks learn," Diego continued, his natural teaching ability emerging as he explained complex concepts. "As the AI system learns, it changes the optimal resource distribution, which means you need dynamic optimization rather than static allocation." The board members watched with growing amazement as Diego outlined mathematical approaches that none of their highly paid consultants had suggested. By applying Lagrange multipliers to the constraint functions and using gradient descent with momentum adjustments, Diego explained, while writing increasingly sophisticated equations, you can create a system that continuously optimizes resource allocation as the AI learning process evolves. Elizabeth Warren, who held a PhD in applied mathematics from Stanford, was following Diego's mathematical reasoning with obvious fascination. "Diego, where did you learn about Lagrange multipliers and gradient descent optimization?" "From textbooks at the public library and online courses from universities that post their lectures for free," Diego replied matter-of-factly. "I've been studying advanced mathematics for about 8 years, since I was 11 years old." The silence that followed this revelation was profound. The board members were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something extraordinary, a 19-year-old street vendor who possessed mathematical abilities that exceeded most PhD researchers. "Diego," said Michael Torres, who specialized in artificial intelligence investments, Can you show us how your optimization approach would apply to actual AI companies in our portfolio? Absolutely, Diego replied, his enthusiasm for the subject overcoming his intimidation about the setting. Do you have specific examples of companies that are struggling with computational efficiency? For the next hour, Diego systematically analyzed the mathematical challenges facing 3 different AI companies in Chen Ventures' portfolio, providing solutions that were more sophisticated and more practical than anything the company's own technical teams had developed. His analysis of neural network optimization revealed inefficiencies that were costing the companies millions in computational expenses. His approach to distributed computing resource allocation could reduce training times by 40% while improving model accuracy. Most impressively, his insights into algorithmic scaling suggested new approaches to AI development that could provide competitive advantages worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Diego, said Jennifer Martinez, who had been taking extensive notes throughout his presentation, your mathematical approach to AI optimization is more advanced than anything I've seen from technical teams at Stanford, MIT, or Caltech. How is this possible? Diego's answer revealed both his extraordinary intellectual gifts and the economic realities that had kept those gifts hidden. Ms. Martinez, mathematics doesn't require expensive equipment or formal credentials, he said simply. All you need is curiosity, access to information, and the willingness to work through difficult problems until you understand them. I've had plenty of time to study because I couldn't afford college, and I've had plenty of difficult problems to work on because I enjoy the challenge. Robert Kim, who had initially been skeptical about Diego's presence in the meeting, was now studying the mathematical equations on the whiteboard with obvious respect. Diego, I have to ask you directly, Robert said. If you possess this level of mathematical ability, why are you selling puzzles on street corners instead of working for Google, Facebook, or one of the major AI research institutions? Diego's answer highlighted the barriers that often prevented exceptional talent from finding appropriate opportunities. Mr. Kim, I applied to several universities for scholarships, but my family's immigration status complicated the process, and we couldn't afford the application fees for more than a few schools, Diego explained. I also applied for internships at tech companies, but most require college enrollment or computer science degrees that I don't have. So I've been supporting my family by selling puzzles and tutoring neighborhood kids in mathematics while continuing to study on my own, Diego continued. I always hoped that someday I'd find an opportunity to use my mathematical knowledge professionally, but I never imagined it would happen like this. The board members exchanged glances, recognizing that they had just discovered exactly the kind of exceptional talent that their portfolio companies desperately needed, talent that had been invisible to traditional recruiting methods because it didn't come with conventional credentials. Marcus stood up at the head of the conference table, understanding that this moment represented not just an opportunity for Diego, but a chance for Chen Ventures to demonstrate that true innovation came from recognizing exceptional ability regardless of where it was found. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus announced, I propose that we make Diego our first Exceptional Talent Fellow, a position where he can apply his mathematical genius to help our portfolio companies while we support his continued education and professional development. The vote was unanimous. Chapter 3. The Opportunity. The boardroom fell silent as the magnitude of Marcus's proposal sank in. Creating a position for Diego would represent something unprecedented in Chen Ventures' history, hiring someone based purely on demonstrated intellectual ability rather than traditional credentials or professional experience. Marcus, can you elaborate on what you're proposing? Asked Elizabeth Warren, though her tone suggested genuine interest rather than skepticism. What would this Exceptional Talent Fellowship entail? Marcus had been thinking about this possibility since watching Diego solve the optimization problem on the street corner. Elizabeth, we spend millions of dollars annually on consultants and technical advisors to help our portfolio companies solve complex problems. Diego just demonstrated that he can provide more valuable insights than most PhD consultants, and he did it in minutes rather than weeks. He gestured toward the whiteboard where Diego's mathematical equations were still visible. I'm proposing that we create a fellowship program where exceptional individuals like Diego can work directly with our portfolio companies while pursuing formal education and professional development. Robert Kim leaned forward with obvious interest. Marcus, you're talking about fundamentally changing how we identify and develop talent. Are you sure Diego's abilities are representative of what this program could achieve? Robert, let me show you something else, Marcus replied, then turned to Diego. Diego, are you familiar with the computational challenges involved in cryptocurrency mining and blockchain optimization? Diego's eyes brightened with recognition. Yes, sir. Blockchain efficiency is essentially a distributed computing problem with cryptographic constraints. The mathematical principles are similar to AI optimization, but with different objective functions. One of our portfolio companies, CryptoSecure Technologies, has been struggling with mining efficiency problems that are costing them approximately $2 million monthly in excess energy consumption, Marcus explained. Their technical team has been working on the problem for 6 months without success. Could you take a look at their optimization challenge? Marcus asked Diego. I'd be happy to try, Diego replied, moving back to the whiteboard. Marcus pulled out his laptop and displayed CryptoSecure's technical specifications, including their current mining algorithms, energy consumption patterns and efficiency metrics. The data represented months of work by a team of computer scientists and electrical engineers. Diego studied the information for about 5 minutes, asking clarifying questions about hardware specifications and network architecture. Then he began writing on the whiteboard, his mathematical analysis flowing naturally from the blockchain optimization principles he had apparently mastered through self-study. The problem is that you're using a brute force approach to hash calculations when you could be using predictive algorithms to eliminate obviously unproductive computational paths, Diego explained as he worked. If you apply machine learning techniques to historical mining patterns, you can reduce unnecessary calculations by approximately 60%. He outlined a mathematical framework that combined cryptographic theory with predictive analytics, creating an approach that none of the company's technical team had considered. By implementing this optimization algorithm, Diego concluded, you should be able to reduce energy consumption by about 55%, while actually improving mining success rates by approximately 15%. The board members stared at Diego's analysis in amazement. He had just identified a solution that could save CryptoSecure over $1 million monthly, while improving their competitive position in the cryptocurrency mining market. Diego, said Michael Torres, you just solved in 15 minutes a problem that has been costing one of our companies millions of dollars for months. How many other types of technical problems can you approach this way? Mr. Torres' mathematical principles are universal, Diego replied with characteristic modesty. Whether you're optimizing AI algorithms, blockchain efficiency, financial risk models, or logistics networks, the underlying mathematical structures are often similar. Once you understand the fundamental principles, you can apply them to many different problems. Jennifer Martinez, who had been taking notes throughout Diego's presentation, looked up with obvious excitement. Diego, what other areas of mathematics and technology have you studied? I've worked on optimization theory, cryptography, machine learning algorithms, network theory, game theory, statistical modeling, and quantum computing mathematics, Diego replied. I'm also interested in financial mathematics and risk analysis, though I haven't had as much opportunity to apply those concepts practically. The list of Diego's self-taught expertise was staggering. He had essentially given himself a graduate-level education in applied mathematics and computer science through pure intellectual curiosity and determination. Diego, this is remarkable, said Elizabeth Warren, but I have to ask you something important. If we create this fellowship position for you, what are your long-term goals? What do you hope to achieve professionally? Diego considered the question carefully before responding. Ms. Warren, my dream has always been to use mathematics to solve important problems that could help people. I've been selling puzzles on the street corner because it was the only way I could support my family while continuing to study. But I've always hoped to find opportunities to apply mathematical knowledge to meaningful challenges. He gestured toward the equations on the whiteboard. If I could work with companies to solve technical problems while also pursuing formal education, I think I could make significant contributions to artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, financial optimization, and other fields where Mathematical innovation creates real value. But more than personal success, Diego continued, I'd want to help identify and develop other people who might have similar abilities, but haven't had opportunities to demonstrate them. I know there are other young people in my community who have exceptional intellectual gifts, but lack access to traditional educational pathways. Diego's response revealed not only his intellectual abilities, but also his character and commitment to using his talents for broader benefit, rather than just personal advancement. Marcus stood up, recognizing that this conversation represented a defining moment for both Diego and Chen Ventures. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have an opportunity to do something unprecedented. We can create a talent development program that identifies exceptional individuals regardless of their background or credentials, provides them with opportunities to demonstrate their capabilities, and supports their professional development while they contribute to our portfolio companies. Diego would be our first exceptional talent fellow, but he wouldn't be the last, Marcus continued. We could systematically identify individuals with exceptional abilities who have been overlooked by traditional recruiting methods, giving them opportunities to contribute their talents while we benefit from insights that our competitors can't access. The board members looked around the table, understanding that they were considering something that could transform not only their investment strategy, but also their approach to recognizing and developing human potential. I think we need to vote on this proposal, said Elizabeth Warren. All in favor of creating the Exceptional Talent Fellowship Program with Diego Ramirez as our first fellow. 8 hands went up around the conference table. Diego Ramirez, who had woken up that morning as a 19-year-old street vendor selling puzzles for grocery money, was about to become the first Exceptional Talent Fellow at one of Silicon Valley's most successful venture capital firms. But more importantly, he was about to prove that genius existed in unexpected places and that the most valuable innovations often came from people who had been overlooked by traditional systems of recognition and opportunity. Chapter 4. The Integration. 3 weeks after the boardroom meeting that changed his life, Diego Ramirez sat in a sleek office on the 38th floor of the High Chen Ventures building, reviewing technical documents for 5 different artificial intelligence companies, while simultaneously participating in video conferences with engineering teams from around the world. The transformation had been remarkable, not just for Diego personally, but for the entire culture of Chen Ventures and their portfolio companies. Marcus Chen had moved quickly to establish the Exceptional Talent Fellowship Program, creating a formal structure that could identify and develop unconventional genius while providing immediate value to their investment portfolio. Diego's first assignment had been to conduct comprehensive mathematical analysis for all 12 AI companies in Chen Ventures' current portfolio, identifying optimization opportunities that their internal technical teams might have overlooked. The results had exceeded everyone's expectations. Within 2 weeks, Diego had identified computational efficiency improvements that could save the portfolio companies a combined total of over $15 million annually. More importantly, his optimization algorithms had improved AI training speeds by an average of 38% across all 12 companies. Diego, the technical team at Neural Dynamics wants to implement your distributed learning algorithm immediately, announced Sarah Kim, Chen Ventures Director of Portfolio Management, as she entered Diego's office. They estimate it will reduce their model training time from 6 weeks to less than 4 weeks while improving accuracy by 12%. Diego looked up from the quantum computing research papers he had been studying. That's great news, Sarah. Have they considered the scalability implications? The algorithm should work even better as they expand to larger data sets. What impressed everyone at Chen Ventures wasn't just Diego's mathematical abilities, but his intuitive understanding of how technical improvements translated into business value. Despite never having worked in a corporate environment, he quickly grasped the commercial implications of his optimization work. Diego, there's something else I want to discuss with you, Sarah continued, settling into the chair across from his desk. We've been receiving inquiries from other venture capital firms asking about our secret weapon for technical due diligence. Word is spreading throughout Silicon Valley about the mathematical insights we're providing to portfolio companies. Diego smiled at the description. I'm hardly a secret weapon. I'm just applying mathematical principles that are available to anyone willing to study them. But that's exactly the point, Sarah replied. Most people aren't willing or able to study advanced mathematics to the level you've achieved through self-education. You're providing insights that our competitors can't match because they're relying on traditional recruiting methods that wouldn't have identified someone with your background. The success of Diego's work had attracted attention from beyond Chen Venture's immediate portfolio. Several major technology companies had inquired about consulting services, recognizing that Diego's mathematical approach to optimization problems could provide competitive advantages worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But perhaps the most significant development was the expansion of the Exceptional Talent Fellowship program itself. Marcus Chen had authorized Sarah to begin systematically identifying other individuals with exceptional abilities who might be overlooked by traditional recruiting methods. "Diego, I want to show you something," Sarah said, pulling out a folder with application materials. "We've received over 300 applications for the Exceptional Talent Fellowship program since announcing it 3 weeks ago." Diego reviewed the applications with growing excitement. The candidates included a former refugee from Syria who had taught himself computer programming while living in a refugee camp, a single mother from Detroit who had developed breakthrough algorithms for supply chain optimization while working night shifts at a warehouse, and a teenager from rural Mississippi who had created sophisticated financial modeling systems to help his family's small farm optimize crop yields. "These people are brilliant," Diego said, after reviewing several applications. "Their approaches to technical problems are completely different from what you'd see in traditional academic environments, but they're often more creative and more practical." "That's exactly what Marcus hoped would happen," Sarah replied. "We're discovering that exceptional intellectual ability exists everywhere, but our traditional recruiting methods only identify people who have had access to conventional educational pathways." Diego's success had also opened doors for his own continued education. Stanford University had offered him a full scholarship to pursue a PhD in applied mathematics, with the understanding that he would continue his fellowship work with Chen Ventures while completing his formal education. "Diego, there's one more thing I wanted to discuss," Sarah said. "Marcus wants to know if you'd be interested in leading the expansion of the Exceptional Talent Fellowship program. You'd be responsible for identifying candidates, designing evaluation methods, and developing integration programs that help exceptional individuals transition into professional environments." The offer represented an opportunity that Diego had never imagined possible. Just 1 month earlier, he had been selling puzzles on street corners, while dreaming of someday finding opportunities to use his mathematical knowledge professionally. Now, he was being offered the chance to create pathways for other people with similar talents and circumstances. "Sarah, I'd be honored to lead that program," Diego replied, "but I want to make sure we design it correctly. We need evaluation methods that can identify genuine, intellectual ability regardless of educational background, and we need support systems that help people transition from unconventional circumstances to professional environments." "What would those evaluation methods look like?" Sarah asked. "They'd focus on problem-solving ability rather than formal knowledge," Diego explained. "We'd present candidates with novel challenges that require creative thinking and mathematical insight, then evaluate their approaches rather than just their answers." Diego outlined a comprehensive framework for identifying exceptional talent that emphasized practical problem-solving, intellectual curiosity, and the ability to learn and adapt quickly rather than specific educational credentials or professional experience. "Most importantly," Diego continued, "we'd need mentorship and support programs that help people navigate professional environments that might be completely foreign to their previous experience. The transition from street vendor to venture capital fellow has been amazing, but it's also been challenging in ways I didn't anticipate." Sarah took extensive notes as Diego described his vision for expanding the program. His insights were valuable not only because of his intellectual abilities, but because he understood from personal experience the barriers that prevented exceptional talent from finding appropriate opportunities. "Diego, I think you've identified something really important," Sarah said when he finished. "We're not just creating a recruiting program. We're creating a new model for recognizing and developing human potential that could transform how companies identify talent." As their meeting concluded, Diego reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought him from solving puzzles on street corners to designing talent development programs for one of Silicon Valley's most successful venture capital firms. But what excited him most wasn't his personal transformation. It was the possibility of creating opportunities for other people whose exceptional abilities had been overlooked by traditional systems of recognition and development. The street vendor who had solved complex mathematical problems for survival was about to become the architect of a program that could identify and develop genius wherever it existed, regardless of circumstances or conventional credentials. Chapter 5. The Expansion. 6 months after Diego's transformation from street vendor to exceptional talent fellow, the Chen Ventures Fellowship Program had grown into the most innovative talent development initiative in Silicon Valley. Under Diego's leadership, the program had identified and recruited 12 exceptional individuals whose unconventional backgrounds belied extraordinary intellectual capabilities. The success stories were remarkable. Maria Santos, the single mother from Detroit who had developed supply chain optimization algorithms while working warehouse night shifts, had revolutionized inventory management for 3 different e-commerce companies in Chen Ventures' portfolio. Her algorithms had reduced storage costs by 23% while improving delivery speeds by 35%. Ahmed Hassan, the former Syrian refugee who had taught himself programming in a refugee camp, had created cybersecurity protocols that were now being implemented by financial institutions across the United States. His approach to encryption, developed without access to traditional computer science, education, had identified vulnerabilities that conventional security experts had missed. Most remarkably, 16-year-old Emily Chen, no relation to Marcus, from rural Mississippi, had developed financial modeling systems that were outperforming algorithms created by quantitative analysts with decades of Wall Street experience. Her mathematical approach to market prediction was generating returns that exceeded industry benchmarks by significant margins. Diego, the results from our fellowship program are exceeding every projection we made, Marcus Chen announced during their weekly strategy meeting. Our portfolio companies are achieving technical breakthroughs and efficiency improvements that are directly attributable to insights from our exceptional talent fellows. Diego looked up from the research papers he had been reviewing, quantum computing applications for financial modeling that could revolutionize investment analysis. Marcus, I think we're just beginning to understand the potential. Each of our fellows brings unique perspectives that complement traditional technical approaches. What do you mean by unique perspectives? Asked Elizabeth Warren, who had become one of the program's strongest advocates among the board members. Elizabeth, conventional education teaches people to approach problems using established methodologies, Diego explained. But our fellows learn to solve problems through necessity and creativity, which often leads to innovations that formerly trained experts wouldn't consider. Diego outlined how each fellow's unconventional background had contributed to their problem-solving abilities. Maria's warehouse experience had taught her to optimize physical systems in ways that computer science graduates rarely understood. Ahmed's refugee experience had taught him to create security systems that could function under extreme constraints. Emily's agricultural background had given her insights into risk management that urban financial analysts typically missed. The diversity of their approaches is creating synergies that we never anticipated, Diego continued. When we put them together on complex projects, they solve problems faster and more creatively than traditional teams. The success of the Chen Ventures Fellowship Program had attracted attention from major technology companies, universities, and government agencies who wanted to understand how systematic identification of unconventional talent could improve their own innovation capabilities. Google had approached Chen Ventures about licensing their talent identification methodology. MIT had offered to collaborate on research projects that could scale their approach to identifying exceptional ability. The Department of Defense had inquired about applying their techniques to identify technical talent for national security applications, but Diego's vision extended beyond just identifying exceptional individuals for high-technology applications. He had begun developing programs to identify and develop talent in communities that traditional recruiting efforts never reached. Marcus, I want to show you something we've been working on, Diego said, pulling out a folder with preliminary research data. We've been conducting talent identification workshops in community centers, libraries, and schools in underserved neighborhoods throughout Los Angeles. The results were extraordinary. Diego's team had identified over 200 individuals with exceptional mathematical, analytical, or creative problem-solving abilities who had never been recognized by traditional educational systems. Most of these people are working in service jobs, manual labor, or are unemployed, despite possessing intellectual capabilities that exceed many college graduates, Diego explained. They're invisible to conventional recruiting because they lack formal credentials, but their practical problem-solving abilities are remarkable. Diego showed Marcus examples of the talent they had discovered. A janitor at a local high school had developed mathematical models for optimizing building energy efficiency that were more sophisticated than systems used by professional engineering firms. A restaurant cook had created inventory management algorithms that could reduce food waste by 40% while maintaining quality standards. A taxi driver had developed route optimization systems that outperformed GPS navigation software. Diego, you're describing a completely untapped reservoir of human intellectual potential, Marcus said with obvious excitement. How do we scale this discovery process? That's exactly what I've been thinking about, Diego replied. We need to create systematic approaches to talent identification that go beyond traditional educational and professional channels. Diego outlined his vision for a comprehensive talent development ecosystem that could identify exceptional abilities in any community, provide educational and professional development opportunities, and connect talented individuals with organizations that could benefit from their capabilities. The key insight is that intellectual potential exists everywhere, but our current systems only recognize it when it comes with specific credentials or backgrounds, Diego explained. If we can develop better identification methods and support systems, we can access human capital that our competitors don't even know exists. Marcus was beginning to understand that Diego wasn't just describing a recruiting strategy, he was proposing a fundamental transformation in how organizations identified and developed human potential. Diego, what you're describing could revolutionize not just venture capital, but every industry that depends on intellectual innovation, Marcus said. Are you prepared to lead an initiative of that magnitude? Diego considered the question carefully. 9 months earlier, he had been selling puzzles on street corners while dreaming of someday finding opportunities to use his mathematical knowledge professionally. Now he was being asked to design systems that could identify and develop exceptional talent throughout entire economic sectors. Marcus, I think this is exactly what I'm meant to do, Diego replied. But I want to make sure we approach it correctly. We're not just creating business opportunities. We're creating pathways for people to use their intellectual gifts in ways that benefit both themselves and society. What would that approach look like? Marcus asked. It would combine systematic talent identification with comprehensive support systems that help people transition from whatever circumstances they're currently in to professional environments where they can contribute their capabilities, Diego explained. Most importantly, it would be designed to benefit the individuals we identify, not just the organizations that hire them. We want to create genuine opportunities for intellectual and economic advancement, not just extract talent from underserved communities. As their meeting concluded, Marcus realized that Diego had evolved from an exceptional individual contributor to a visionary leader who could transform how organizations throughout the economy identified and developed human potential. The street vendor, who had solved mathematical puzzles for survival, had become the architect of a movement that could unlock intellectual capabilities that had been invisible to traditional systems of recognition and opportunity. But the most significant challenges and opportunities were still ahead of them as they prepared to scale their approach beyond Silicon Valley venture capital to entire industries and economic sectors. Chapter 6. The Recognition. 1 year after Diego's discovery on the corner of Wilshire and Figueroa, Chen Ventures had become the most sought-after venture capital firm in Silicon Valley, not because of their financial resources, but because of their unique ability to solve technical problems that stumped other investors and their portfolio companies. The Exceptional Talent Fellowship Program had grown to include 47 fellows, each contributing unique insights that were generating millions of dollars in value for Chen Ventures' portfolio companies. More importantly, the program had demonstrated that exceptional intellectual ability existed throughout every community and economic sector when organizations knew how to recognize and develop it. Diego's role had evolved from individual contributor to director of talent innovation, leading a team of 12 people who were implementing talent identification programs across multiple industries. But his most significant achievement was the development of systematic methodologies that could identify and develop exceptional ability regardless of educational background or professional experience. The breakthrough had come when Diego realized that traditional intelligence testing and academic assessment focused on measuring knowledge rather than the ability to acquire and apply knowledge creatively. His new evaluation methods presented candidates with novel problems that required innovative thinking rather than recall of specific information. The key insight, Diego explained during his presentation at the National Science Foundation's Innovation Summit, is that exceptional intellectual ability is characterized by pattern recognition, creative problem solving, and the capacity to learn rapidly from limited information. These capabilities can be measured and developed regardless of someone's formal educational background. The audience of research scientists, university administrators, and technology executives listened with obvious fascination as Diego outlined evaluation methods that had identified exceptional talent in communities that traditional recruiting had never reached. We've discovered remarkable intellectual capabilities among people working as custodians, food service workers, retail employees, and manual laborers, Diego continued. These individuals possess problem-solving abilities that exceed many PhD researchers, but they've never had opportunities to demonstrate their capabilities in appropriate contexts. Diego showed specific examples of talent discovered through his program. A night security guard in Chicago had developed predictive algorithms for preventing break-ins that were more accurate than systems used by professional security companies. A hotel housekeeper in Miami had created optimization models for cleaning efficiency that reduced labor costs by 30% while improving guest satisfaction. A construction worker in Phoenix had designed structural engineering improvements that increased building safety while reducing material costs. Each of these individuals possesses intellectual capabilities that could contribute to advanced research, technology development, or strategic problem-solving, Diego explained. But conventional recruiting methods would never identify them because they lacked traditional credentials. The presentation concluded with a comprehensive proposal for scaling talent identification programs throughout the American economy, creating pathways for exceptional individuals to contribute their capabilities while advancing their own educational and professional development. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Within 2 weeks of Diego's NSF presentation, Chen Ventures had received collaboration requests from 43 organizations, including major technology companies, research universities, government agencies, and non-profit organizations. Microsoft wanted to implement Diego's talent identification methods to discover exceptional programmers and engineers in communities their traditional recruiting had never reached. Stanford University proposed establishing a research center to study and scale Diego's evaluation techniques. The Department of Energy inquired about applying his methods to identify talent for advanced scientific research projects. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from his own community. Diego had been invited to speak at his former high school in East Los Angeles, where many students faced the same economic and educational barriers that had once seemed insurmountable to him. 1 year ago, I was selling puzzles on street corners to help support my family while studying mathematics from library books, Diego told the assembly of 200 high school students. I thought that economic circumstances would prevent me from ever using my education for meaningful work. The students listened with obvious attention as Diego described his journey from street vendor to leading a program that was transforming how organizations identified and developed talent. But I learned something important, Diego continued. Intellectual ability and the potential to contribute meaningfully to society exist in every community and every economic circumstance. The challenge isn't developing exceptional capabilities. The challenge is creating opportunities for those capabilities to be recognized and utilized. Diego outlined scholarship and mentorship programs that Chen Ventures had established specifically to identify and develop talent among students who faced economic or educational barriers to traditional pathways. "We're not just looking for students with perfect grades or test scores," Diego explained. "We're looking for students who demonstrate creativity, problem-solving ability, intellectual curiosity, and the determination to learn independently when formal resources aren't available." The scholarship program Diego described was comprehensive, providing not only financial support for education, but also mentorship, internship opportunities, and professional development that could help students transition from any economic background to careers where they could contribute their intellectual capabilities. After his presentation, Diego was approached by dozens of students who had never imagined that their intellectual interests could translate into professional opportunities. Many of them possessed the same combination of mathematical curiosity and creative problem-solving that had characterized Diego's own development. "Mr. Ramirez, I've been interested in computer programming since I was 12, but my family can't afford college, and I don't know how to get started professionally," said Maria Gonzalez, a 17-year-old senior who had taught herself multiple programming languages using free online resources. "Maria, programming ability like yours is exactly what our fellowship program is designed to identify and develop," Diego replied. "Would you be interested in participating in our evaluation process?" Similar conversations continued throughout the afternoon as Diego identified students whose intellectual capabilities had been overlooked by traditional educational systems, but who possessed exactly the kind of creative problem-solving abilities that his program was designed to recognize and develop. By the end of the day, Diego had identified 12 students who would be invited to participate in Chen Ventures' talent evaluation process, with the possibility of receiving scholarships, mentorship, and professional development opportunities that could transform their educational and career prospects. As Diego drove home through the East Los Angeles neighborhoods where he had grown up, he reflected on the remarkable transformation that had occurred, not just in his own life, but in the systematic recognition and development of human potential that his work was helping to create. The young man who had once doubted whether his intellectual abilities would ever find appropriate outlets had become a leader in creating opportunities for countless others whose exceptional capabilities had been invisible to traditional systems of recognition and opportunity. But Diego understood that his most important work was still ahead of him as he prepared to scale talent identification and development programs that could unlock human potential throughout entire economic and educational systems. Chapter 7. The Breakthrough. 2 years after his transformation from street vendor to talent innovation leader, Diego Ramirez stood before the United Nations General Assembly, presenting a comprehensive framework for identifying and developing human intellectual potential that could be implemented by organizations and governments worldwide. The presentation was the culmination of research and practical implementation that had demonstrated how systematic talent identification could unlock exceptional capabilities that traditional educational and professional systems consistently overlooked. "Distinguished delegates," Diego began, his voice carrying clearly through the assembly hall, where representatives from 193 countries had gathered to consider approaches to human development and economic innovation. "We face a fundamental challenge in utilizing human intellectual potential effectively. Current systems of education and professional development identify and cultivate only a small fraction of existing exceptional ability." Diego's work with Chen Ventures had expanded far beyond venture capital to include collaborations with universities, technology companies, government agencies, and international development organizations. The results had been remarkable, with talent identification programs discovering exceptional capabilities in every community and economic sector where they had been implemented. Our research has demonstrated that intellectual potential capable of contributing to advanced scientific research, technological innovation, and strategic problem-solving exists throughout every population, Diego continued. The barrier to utilizing this potential is not its absence, but our inadequate methods for recognizing and developing it. Diego outlined the mathematical and psychological principles underlying his evaluation methods, explaining how they measured pattern recognition, creative problem-solving, and learning ability rather than specific knowledge or formal credentials. Traditional assessment focuses on measuring what people know, Diego explained. Our approach measures how people think, how they approach novel problems, and how quickly they can acquire and apply new knowledge. These capabilities are better predictors of intellectual contribution than formal educational achievement. The presentation included case studies from implementations across 12 countries, demonstrating how Diego's methods had identified exceptional talent in communities that traditional recruiting had never considered. In rural Kenya, the program had discovered mathematical genius among subsistence farmers who had developed sophisticated optimization models for crop yields without formal education. In urban Brazil, exceptional engineering capabilities had been identified among construction workers who had created innovative building techniques that exceeded professional standards. In rural India, advanced computer programming abilities had been found among young people who had taught themselves software development using basic mobile phones and limited internet access. Each of these examples demonstrates that intellectual exceptional exists independently of economic circumstances, formal education, or professional credentials, Diego explained. The challenge is creating systematic methods to identify this potential and provide appropriate development opportunities. Diego's presentation continued with detailed implementation guidelines that could be adapted by organizations and governments seeking to unlock intellectual potential within their own populations. The framework included evaluation methods that could be administered in any language or cultural context, development programs that could function within existing educational systems, and professional placement strategies that could connect exceptional individuals with organizations capable of utilizing their capabilities. Most importantly, Diego emphasized, successful talent development requires recognizing that exceptional individuals often approach problems differently than conventionally trained experts. This diversity of thinking is valuable precisely because it generates insights that traditional approaches miss. The response to Diego's UN presentation was immediate and comprehensive. Within 1 month, implementation agreements had been signed with educational ministries in 27 countries, technology companies on 6 continents, and international development organizations seeking to improve their effectiveness in identifying and utilizing local intellectual resources. But the most significant breakthrough came when Diego's methodology was applied to scientific research challenges that had resisted solution despite years of work by traditional research teams. The first success occurred when NASA engaged Diego's team to identify individuals capable of contributing to space exploration challenges that required innovative mathematical and engineering approaches. The talent search discovered a former mechanic in rural Montana who had developed propulsion theories that addressed fundamental problems in spacecraft design, a restaurant manager in urban Detroit who had created resource optimization models applicable to long-term space missions, and a high school dropout in suburban Phoenix who had solved orbital mechanics problems that had challenged aerospace engineers for decades. These individuals brought perspectives to space exploration challenges that our traditional recruiting methods would never have identified, explained Dr. Sarah Martinez, NASA's Director of Advanced Concepts Development. Their approaches to problem-solving were unconventional but remarkably effective. The second major breakthrough occurred when the Centers for Disease Control engaged Diego's team to identify exceptional analytical capabilities that could contribute to epidemiological research and public health optimization. The talent search discovered a taxi driver in Chicago who had developed disease transmission models more accurate than those used by public health agencies, a custodian at a hospital in Atlanta who had created infection prevention protocols that exceeded professional standards, and a retail worker in Los Angeles who had developed statistical analysis methods for health data that revealed patterns that conventional epidemiologists had missed. Diego's talent identification methods are discovering intellectual capabilities that can contribute to advanced scientific research regardless of the individual's formal training or professional background, said Dr. Michael Chen, CDC's Chief of Applied Analytics. We're accessing human intellectual resources that we never knew existed. The third breakthrough came when the Department of Defense applied Diego's methods to identify individuals capable of contributing to cybersecurity and strategic analysis challenges that required exceptional problem-solving abilities. The results were classified, but public reports indicated that talent discovered through Diego's program had provided insights into complex security challenges that traditional intelligence analysis had not identified. What Diego has created, said General Patricia Williams during a public briefing, is a systematic approach to discovering intellectual capabilities that can contribute to national security challenges, regardless of where those capabilities currently exist in our population. By the end of his second year leading talent innovation initiatives, Diego's methods were being implemented by organizations and governments around the world, creating opportunities for thousands of individuals whose exceptional capabilities had been overlooked by traditional systems, while simultaneously solving complex problems that had resisted conventional approaches. The young man who had sold puzzles on street corners, while dreaming of using his mathematical knowledge professionally, had become the architect of a global movement to identify and develop human intellectual potential wherever it existed. But Diego understood that his most important contribution wasn't the specific individuals who had been identified through his programs. It was the fundamental transformation in how organizations and societies understood the distribution and development of human intellectual capability. He had proven that genius existed everywhere, waiting to be recognized and cultivated by systems humble enough to look beyond conventional credentials and wise enough to value human potential regardless of its current circumstances. Chapter 8. The Legacy. 5 years after Marcus Chen first encountered Diego, solving mathematical puzzles on a Los Angeles street corner, the ripple effects of their meeting had transformed not only Diego's life, but entire approaches to talent identification and human development across multiple sectors of the global economy. Diego, now 24 years old and holding a PhD in applied mathematics from Stanford, completed in accelerated fashion while continuing his full-time work leading talent innovation programs, had established the Global Institute for Exceptional Talent Recognition, an international organization dedicated to identifying and developing intellectual capabilities regardless of educational background or economic circumstances. The Institute's work had reached every continent, with talent identification programs operating in 47 countries and partnerships with over 300 organizations, including universities, technology companies, government agencies, and international development organizations. But what made Diego most proud wasn't the scale of the programs he had created. It was the individual stories of transformation that demonstrated how recognizing exceptional ability could change lives while solving important problems. Maria Santos, the single mother from Detroit who had developed supply chain optimization algorithms while working warehouse night shifts, had completed her computer science degree and was now leading artificial intelligence research at Ford Motor Company, where her innovations in autonomous vehicle routing were revolutionizing transportation efficiency. Ahmed Hassan, the former Syrian refugee who had taught himself programming in a refugee camp, had founded a cybersecurity company that was protecting financial institutions across 3 continents while employing over 200 people, many of whom were refugees and immigrants whose technical abilities had been overlooked by traditional recruiting methods. Emily Chen, the teenager from rural Mississippi who had developed sophisticated financial modeling systems to help her family's farm, had graduated from MIT at age 19 and was now working as a quantitative analyst at the Federal Reserve, where her approaches to economic forecasting were influencing national monetary policy. Each of these success stories represents something much larger than individual achievement, Diego explained during his keynote address at the World Economic Forum in Davos. They demonstrate that exceptional intellectual capability exists throughout every population, waiting to be recognized and developed by systems designed to identify potential rather than credentials. The audience of world leaders, business executives, and academic researchers listened with obvious fascination as Diego outlined the mathematical principles underlying human intellectual potential and the systematic approaches required to identify and develop exceptional abilities effectively. Our research has revealed that approximately 2% of any population possesses intellectual capabilities that could contribute to advanced scientific research, technological innovation, or strategic problem-solving, Diego continued. But traditional educational and professional systems identify and develop less than 20% of this potential. Diego's presentation included comprehensive data from implementations across dozens of countries and economic sectors, demonstrating that his talent identification methods consistently discovered exceptional capabilities in populations that conventional recruiting had never reached. The results were staggering. Countries that implemented Diego's methods reported increases in technological innovation, improvements in problem-solving efficiency across government agencies, and enhanced economic development as previously overlooked intellectual resources were identified and utilized effectively. But the most important insight from our work, Diego emphasized, is that exceptional intellectual ability is not rare. It's invisible to systems that only recognize certain types of credentials and backgrounds. Diego outlined how systematic talent identification could address challenges ranging from scientific research and technological development to economic optimization and social problem-solving by accessing intellectual capabilities that traditional approaches consistently missed. Climate change, pandemic response, economic inequality, technological security, and sustainable development all require innovative solutions that go beyond conventional approaches, Diego explained. The intellectual capabilities necessary to address these challenges exist within our populations, but they're often overlooked because they don't come with traditional credentials. The presentation concluded with a comprehensive framework for implementing talent identification and development programs that could function within existing educational systems while extending recognition and opportunity to individuals whose exceptional abilities had been systematically overlooked. After his Davos presentation, Diego was approached by leaders from around the world seeking to implement his methods within their own countries and organizations. The conversations continued for hours as delegates outlined specific challenges where exceptional problem-solving abilities could provide breakthrough solutions. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Diego returned to Los Angeles and visited the corner of Wilshire and Figueroa, where Marcus Chen had first encountered him solving mathematical puzzles. The street corner looked the same, but a small plaque had been installed by the city commemorating the location where systematic talent identification had been conceived. More importantly, the corner now served as a meeting point for the Los Angeles Exceptional Talent Network, where individuals with exceptional capabilities could connect with organizations seeking innovative problem-solving abilities. Diego, I wanted to thank you for something that goes beyond your professional achievements, Marcus Chen said, as they stood together, looking at the bustling intersection where their paths had first crossed. You've taught me and countless others that human potential exists everywhere, and that our responsibility as leaders is to recognize and develop that potential regardless of where we find it. Marcus gestured toward the street corner where dozens of people were now gathered, some offering tutoring services, others seeking educational opportunities, and many simply engaging in the kind of intellectual discussion that Diego had always found energizing. This corner has become a symbol of something important, Marcus continued. It represents the recognition that intellectual curiosity, problem-solving ability, and the potential to contribute meaningfully to society aren't limited by economic circumstances or formal credentials. Diego smiled. As he watched young people engaged in animated discussions about mathematics, science, and technology, many of them carrying the same combination of intellectual curiosity and economic necessity that had characterized his own development. Marcus, what I've learned is that intelligence and the desire to solve important problems exist in every community, Diego replied. The challenge was never developing these capabilities. The challenge was creating systems that could recognize them and provide appropriate opportunities for their development. As they prepared to leave, Diego reflected on the journey that had taken him from selling puzzles on street corners to leading global initiatives for talent identification and human development. The young man who had once doubted whether his intellectual abilities would ever find appropriate outlets had proven that exceptional capability existed everywhere, waiting to be recognized by leaders humble enough to look beyond conventional assumptions about where intelligence could be found. But more importantly, Diego had demonstrated that recognizing and developing human potential wasn't just morally right, it was economically essential for organizations and societies seeking innovative solutions to their most challenging problems. The street vendor who had solved mathematical puzzles for survival had become the architect of a global movement, proving that genius existed in unexpected places, and that the most valuable innovations often came from people who had been overlooked by traditional systems of recognition and opportunity. Standing on the corner where his transformation had begun, Diego understood that his most important work was not behind him, but ahead of him, as he continued developing systems that could unlock human intellectual potential wherever it existed, creating opportunities for countless others whose exceptional abilities were waiting to be discovered and cultivated by a world wise enough to value intelligence regardless of its circumstances. What an incredible journey we've witnessed together, from that fateful moment when Diego solved a complex mathematical problem in minutes that had stumped PhD researchers for weeks, to watching him transform the entire approach to identifying and developing human intellectual potential around the world. This story proves that true genius has nothing to do with wealth, formal education, or social status. It comes from natural ability, intellectual curiosity, and the courage to pursue knowledge even when circumstances make it difficult. Diego's transformation from street vendor to global leader in talent recognition shows us that exceptional capabilities exist in every community and every economic circumstance, waiting to be recognized by leaders humble enough to look beyond conventional credentials. His story reminds us that the person selling items on the street corner, working in your local restaurant, or cleaning your office building might possess exactly the intellectual abilities needed to solve your most challenging problems. If this story inspired you as much as it inspired me, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more incredible stories of hidden genius and unexpected brilliance. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that intelligence comes in many forms and can be found in the most surprising places. And remember, you might encounter exceptional talent today without even realizing it. The question is, are you paying attention to the problem-solving abilities that exist all around you, or are you missing opportunities because of assumptions about whose intelligence matters?